David, thanks for coming on. Awesome to have you on. I've you've been in the prediction market space for a while, so I'm glad that you decided to hop on and talk about uh, ownership capital. So it should be pretty interesting.
Yeah, John, I'm pretty excited to be here. And, I've been following you for a long time. I've been following your project for a long time. And I didn't really think that I'm going to be on your podcast at some point. So I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, no, it's no, you're doing some really interesting stuff. I mean, I think I wanted to have you on because first of all, you've been in the prediction market space. Just to give some background. So, like, I met you through the prediction market space because I think at the time, what you were doing is you were actually arbing prediction markets. So you set up, an arbitrage system, and I met you through that because when I first started Polyfactual, I was looking for kind of advice on product and stuff, and I think someone in my group told me to reach out to you. I was like, okay, and and that was the initial conversation. So, and it was good. It
Yep,
was
that's
it was
right.
super valuable. That was like my first intro to a prediction market expert.
Yeah, prediction markets have been very exciting. And I feel like a lot of quants are getting on board now and been getting on board for a while now. But back in the day, I don't think there were like not that many of us running different algorithms, either directional or just market making on top of Polymarket. And that's like how I think like one of my posts got really big, where I talked about how we've been doing basically predictions on top of how many, like the market, where you have to calculate how many tweets Elon Musk gonna make next week, right? I get like that was one of the biggest tweets that I ever made, but yeah, it was fun time.
Yeah, yeah, and you got in also when the strategies were, like it. Maybe you can speak a little bit on this because I was talking about this with someone yesterday. Last year, there was, before like Polymarket scaled, you could find like crazy opportunities, like crazy like upside opportunities, like bonds that were at like 70% sometimes, and then things kind of scaled up, really rapidly. From your perspective, like, do those opportunities kind of still exist in prediction markets? Is it getting harder to do things like arbitrage or maybe some of the other strategies you were doing?
Well, definitely harder, but also the technology is getting much better. So I'll give you an example. Uh, like before, it was, I would say, pretty hard to run some algos on the mentions markets, right?
Hmm.
And like talking about like mentions market, and I'm gonna maybe talk about some alpha here. There are like two ways to go about mentions market. One is to take historical data and analyze speeches of a person you're interested in throughout the last, let's say, month, or like before that, or like what has impacted different speeches, and like what have they been talking about based on the recent news, right? So you could do a data aggregation based on historical analysis. Uh, but then the other way to go about it is that usually you don't really know like what the person going to be mentioning before they actually mention it, right? So it could be at 50%, and then all of a sudden it's at like 100%. And the percentage is still there until the end of the speech. Now, you can actually implement or like uh, integrate a minimalistic model which would create probabilistic analysis based on based on the like paragraph, like if you are talking about a new topic, how close that topic is with one of the words on Polymarket. So your internal probability for the word is basically increasing, so you can already start buying the yes market on that specific word. But then also, like once the word is being said on the live, right? Like what the person is starting with, let's say if the word is politics, right? If I
Hmm.
say P and the context is about politics, then there is a pretty high probability that it's going to be a word politics. So once I say the letter P, you should be buying already the yes, most probably, right, on Polymarket. And then if I say O, pretty much your probability on the back end is increasing, so you should be getting even more, right? And then like arbing the market across your systems. Yeah, so like the development of technology, I would say, is giving you all of these tools, whereas like let's say 2 years ago, you wouldn't really be able to analyze the speech on the go, right?
Yeah, mention markets are interesting like that, where I think the opportunities keep popping up. I mean, I remember when I was trading a mention market, specifically, like sometimes the speaker, especially with Trump markets, the speaker will start to talk about like a topic like, they'll start to talk about some geopolitical thing, right? And then you know that they're going to mention the word deploy. Like they're
Right.
getting into the category of the frequently mentioned word. He's going to mention like Iran or something like that as he's leading into this international thing. So the way like the speeches are built, and a lot of these guys, their speeches are very crafted. I don't know if Trump is one of those guys. I don't trade enough Trump mentions, but it's interesting that you can kind of get those hints. So I
Yeah.
think you're right. Like the tools, and it moves really fast. Like, for people who don't trade mentions, when you trade the actual market during the speech, you'll see crazy volatility on almost all of the options, pretty much.
Right. Right. And
Um,
and then you can again like coding on top of FPGA has been like very complicated before. So it's like it was like really hard to find people who would create any kind of algorithm on top of FPGA, which is like parallel computing and very good with machine learning. Um, or like let's say computer vision or like speech recognition. And now you can actually code FPGA and do a voice model on top of it, so that it kind of identifies the word on the go while it's being mentioned in the live stream, right? So that you could then arb the market. So there are like lots of ways right now to arb, and again, technology is getting better, and you can implementing the best technology in all of your algos.
yeah, mention markets might be the market to look at. Maybe that's what I should be doing. Lately, I've been following PM Trader Adam. Shout out to PM Trader Adam. I've been following a lot of his trades just because he's been getting some good early traction. So, and it's a lot of like bond opportunities, and that's what I've been doing lately. But maybe I should get back into mentions now that you're talking about it, because we have all these tools now to help us like actually decipher the mention markets.
Exactly.
So David, let's talk a little bit about what you're doing now. Maybe for people who aren't as familiar with you, maybe if you want to give like a quick intro about kind of what you're working on right now, maybe a little bit about your background. I know we already kind of talked about your poly market experience.
Yeah, sure. So a couple of words about my experience. So I've been doing quite some Web2 startups before, and some of them are still working and functioning and having quite good annual revenue, and that's primarily in my home country in Georgia. We are still having probably like 70%, even more of the market when it comes to Twilio type messaging systems. And like gateway for that, we are running around 120 million messages through our system every month. So that was like one of my businesses that I founded back in 2016, and now it's being run by a CEO and a team, and I'm just kind of on the board. And then we also have an engineering company together with our Israeli partners that does cloud compute and data science primarily. I think we employ around 50 to 60 people across the companies right now. Yeah, and then like in late 2020, like beginning of 2021, that's when I started to get into the algo trading and basically developing different protocols and algorithms in the blockchain space together with my co-founder. And then like last year, I started to write about prediction markets, right? So with my allocator account, which kind of got, I would say, back then, prediction markets haven't been really big yet. And I would say like my account was getting quite popular, right? And then at some point I started to write a lot about MetaDAO. So like talking about MetaDAO, I met Profit back in 2024 on a conference. And when I heard about Futarchy and the decision markets, back then, like my first thought, okay, like how do I arbitrate, right? So how do I find arbitrage opportunities in decision markets? So that's how we started to research decision markets and how they work, like on the protocol level. Uh, and that's how we pretty much took the rabbit hole road, right? And then like writing about MetaDAO, like and the projects in the ecosystem got me really excited about the model and the structure of it. And just like recently, 2 months ago, we met with Profit, and that's where he suggested that we might be one of the candidates to run a MetaDAO native fund. Very exciting opportunity. It's called Ownership Capital. We're going to be focused as an activist investor on MetaDAO ecosystem. We're going to be taking part in deal sourcing, due diligence, and then, of course, being very active post TG, right? So happy to talk more about that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting, and you guys are like the first, like, you're pretty much the first fund on MetaDAO, I think. I mean, I don't think that, you said native fund, but I think you're actually the first fund that has raised, correct?
There are a couple of others, right? So there is Theia Investments that has been supporting MetaDAO and pretty much all of the raises. It's a liquid fund based in New York. And in some of the latest rounds, we have seen Multicoin, I think Variant Fund, and a bunch of other VCs being part of the launches, right? So there is already a culture, I would say, amongst the funds, both liquid and non-liquid, to invest in MetaDAO launches. But I think what's important in our case is that we're going to be solely focused on MetaDAO and taking more of an activist approach when it comes to working with the founders. Because I think that working with a founder and building a relationship is very important to know what is the founder up to, what are the next steps, right? Like what's the vision? And if you are an investor with a big position in it, you basically have this like prolonging relation with the founder, right? And I think it just like smooths up a lot of experiences. Let's say if there is a proposal to be made, since you have already like a really good relation with founder, they could actually walk you through their thinking and why they want to roll out either that or this proposal. Yeah.
And like for an activist fund on MetaDAO, um, again, maybe we need a little context,
Sure.
for MetaDAO, just for people who don't know. But what I'm thinking is, basically there's a Futarchy process, right? So
Yeah.
basically, how MetaDAO works is it's almost like well, maybe you want to get into a little bit,
Yeah. Sure.
like just explain, because it's
Right.
prediction markets combined with a
Yeah.
launch pad, basically.
Okay. So before I get there, which is a bit complicated for some people, so I'll explain that part as well. But first of all, I want to talk like more broadly about benefits of the ownership coins on MetaDAO, right?
Hmm.
So the first one is that the treasury is not being given to the team right away, right? So the treasury is being governed and the team cannot really spend more than their monthly allowance. So let's say you raised $5 million and your monthly allowance is 200K, right? So you're getting only the 200K every month, right? Without any additional voting or proposals. That's one very important thing. And the reason it's important is that it's life, things happen. Maybe at some point after 5 months you are demotivated, it's not working, and you actually want to do something else as a founder, right? uh, well, one way to go is to tell the market about it, and that like for some reason you don't want to proceed with your startup, and in that, or the market thinks that you aren't really pushing the product enough, or like you are focused on something else, so the market can propose a new proposal to liquidate the treasury, right? So in that case, out of $5 million, $4 million are going back to the token holders, right? So essentially, as an investor or like token holder, you're getting 80% of your investment back on a venture that didn't really work, right? So I would say that this kind of case is very new to crypto, where you would usually put some money in the project, like buy a coin, and then you literally don't know where the money is going, how it's being spent, and most probably you're not gonna there is a lesser probability that you're going to be able to get it back if the project does not really do any do any progress on the development path. Yeah, so that's one, right? Treasury control. The other thing is, before, we would usually have equity holders on one side for a project, and those were usually the investors and the team. And then a project would have a token, and the token might have had some buybacks or a portion of revenue, but pretty much the primary decision power was giving to the equity holders, right? And then something would usually go to the token holders. So MetaDAO is changing that, where through having, well, the legal structure of it is that there is a segregated portfolio company in Cayman under MetaDAO's structure, pretty much. So every new company that is raising money has to transfer all of their IP to the entity in Cayman, right? So in a way, the IP is now owned by the token holders, right? So if something goes wrong, the token holders can always, in fact, even find a new team to lead the project and the IP that is being developed, right? So that's true. The IP is owned by the token holders. And like if you think even like from these two perspectives, it already makes a lot of sense, right? Like in terms of like token protection and token rights
Yeah.
protection. Yeah.
Yeah. I think this is like, basically I see there's two ways that this is happening, right? This ownership economy is kind of building. One, you have the MetaDAO way, which is what you just described, which is fully kind of on chain. And then there's also, the other way that I've seen, which is kind of like, you get equity, right? And then that equity is somehow represented on chain. Maybe it's represented through like an NFT or some other token. But basically what happens is, you would raise, and then you get like, you get some sort of proof of equity, but the equity is like kind of like legally,
Right.
there's like a legal kind of agreement there.
Yeah.
Um,
So there are new structures where, let's say, there is an SPV that holds a portion of the equity, and then the token holders have not an ownership of the equity in the SPV, but economic rights to the upside um, of that equity. Like if I frame it that way, right? But it's very different, because then again you have this like huge portion of equity on the other side, and as an SPV token holder, it doesn't really give you a lot of rights on the macro level. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too what you're doing, because like the structure of like an activist fund, and I think, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but the purpose, I think, of an activist fund on MetaDAO would be, maybe, like, is passive holders like an issue? Like, for instance, like if you raise in a token, a lot of those holders, are they going to participate in the prediction, in the Futarchy process? Because as
Okay.
an activist, you would be, obviously you'd be like a very, very active participant. You'd be probably more active than some of the other people. So I think that might be one upside I see. But I'm curious on
Yeah.
where you see the value of activists versus just one of these regular funds.
Sure. Yeah, and here we get to the Futurkey and how the decision markets work, right? So with Futurkey and decision markets, uh, you are buying the outcome, and whichever outcome has a higher price compared to the token price, that's the one that usually wins, right? Um, I can give you an example. Let's say there is a project, and the project is trading at $1 per token, right? And now the decision needs to be made whether, let's say, we should fire the CEO or keep him, for example, right? So what happens on the technical level, on the code side, is that two tokens are being issued for the next 3 days. So one token is like the project token where the CEO is fired, and another token where the CEO is not fired, right? And we take as a for a comparison, we take the market price of the actual token, which trades at $1, right? So during the next 3 days, people are able to buy or sell these two newly minted token types, like with a fired and non-fired CEO. And whichever has a higher price, for example, the price of a not fired CEO is, let's say, 1.1, and the fired CEO token price is 0.8. It means that the market believes that keeping the CEO in place creates a positive expected value for the project price and market cap and the token price, right? So in a way, you are estimating what going to be the market valuation of the project in these both decisions, right? Like in each of them, and then whichever trades higher means that it's better for the project, and that's the decision that wins, right? And getting back to ownership capital and being an activist, it's very, because there are like so many projects right now, still early, and we are expecting to have like many more projects launched on MetaDAO. At some point, there are going to be too many of them, and you need to have a specialist investor that is actually keeping the relations in place with the founders, having maybe weekly or bi-weekly calls with every founder and understanding where the project is, right? And that's, I think, is a type of due diligence that needs to be done post TG on constant basis to understand what kind of decisions need to be made, right? And then, going back to your question, whether it only like whether we're gonna primarily impact all the decisions, I don't think so. Like I think that what's important for us is to be updated, have all the up-to-date information, and then express our opinions on the market. And then some people might agree with us and some people not. And then, of course, the decision markets will show whose opinion is better for the project itself.
So you mentioned too, like, at first you got into prediction markets, and that's where I know you from. And when you got in initially, your account blew up because it was kind of a hot area. Definitely, prediction markets were very hot in late last year, and now I think they kind of cooled off a little bit. I think if you go to like sites like Trendify, like mindshare sites, you'll see that Polymarket and Kalshi have kind of like gone down in the chart on mindshare a little bit. Um, I'm curious, when you started to get into the ownership economy, are you seeing the same early signals that you saw in prediction markets back in the day? And back in the day, I mean, like a few months
Yeah,
ago.
yeah. Uh, well, first of all, I want to mention a couple of things about prediction markets. Even though the sentiment might not be there anymore right now, it's not like that hot as it used to be. If you actually take a look at the numbers, right? Like over $800 million a month is flowing through the third-party terminals right now, right? Which
Yeah.
is like more than 15% of all the poly market volume monthly, right? So if you take a look at the growth of the ecosystem on poly market, it's just insane, even though there isn't like that much hype right now, which I think is a great time to actually invest in projects in prediction markets. So the ecosystem is actually growing really fast, and I love it. And now getting back to the ownership coins, I think we are very early there, even though there was like, a lot of people are talking about it on X. I really believe that we are early, and we are like early adopters of a new type of an asset. And I believe at some point, like going through different cases, the market will realize that this is like the only way to go forward, really, right? This is like the only way where you as a retail coin holder, you are protected pretty much, like much better than like in any other scenario. And I think like sooner or later, we're going to get to that exponential curve where we will see like a lot of inflow into the ownership coins, yeah, that's like my prediction about it.
How do you see it happening? Like, part of me sees it happening. Like, I'm seeing a lot of talk right now There's a few startups coming out of Alliance, for instance. I think there's a company called Prestock, which is, they're all focused on kind of like private things. Now, these are blue chip private stocks, like get in before the IPO, basically. Get into SpaceX before the IPO. We just had the IPO for SpaceX. We have yet to see how that kind of plays out, if it's going to dump hard or if it's going to kind of keep going up. But yeah, there's a lot of talk about like getting in before the IPO. I see that narrative kind of trickling down to retail. And then eventually that's going to trickle down into like ownership coins, right? People are going to be like, oh, well, the best way to get a deal is to get in on the ownership coin or something like that. Whether it's through MetaDAO or MetalX or one of these companies that are kind of doing that. Like, how do you like where do you see the timeline on this? You think that this is going to happen within the next year? You think this is the next kind of meta for if Bitcoin goes up again? What are your thoughts on this timeline?
Yeah, I think it's definitely the next meta. And like the DeFi summer, if you really think about it, like we did have a bit of an hype in DeFi like before 2021, but that was like nothing compared to what happened next, right? So I think like MetaDAO ecosystem is kind of positioned in that way that we had a bit of a hype around it, but the actual numbers are going to come later in the cycle when we have a good uptrend in the crypto market, and there is like much more attention on coins and on launches. That's like my perspective. And the goal for MetaDAO is to scale up and to do many more launches. So I think like having many more launches, the market being there, going to create like a lot of attention around MetaDAO.
Yeah, I mean, Futarchy, like for people who don't know, there's two aspects to MetaDAO. I think there's like a more kind of blue chip terminal or not terminal, but like kind of launch interface where they have like the higher level companies, if you will, and then you have like Futarchy, which is where some more MetaDAO projects launch. I think I have that right.
Yeah, I can explain the way it works. So on MetaDAO, you would usually have vetted projects, like curated projects, and MetaDAO does a lot of great work to show the project to many investors. So let's say if you want to raise money and you're going to be a curated MetaDAO project, it means that the team will do their best to show it to as many investors as they could, so that even before the launch is there, you already have commitments from investors, right? Which is great. So on Futarchy, it's more of a permissionless launch, right? So anyone can pretty much launch a project and ask for fundraising. But I want to mention that most probably, I can't yet say exactly, but most probably Futarchy are going to be joining the MetaDAO platform. So it's going to be like one platform, and you're going to have curated and permissionless launches next to each other in one interface, pretty much. Yeah, like similar to what we had with art blocks back in the day, that you had curated art blocks, but then you also had a playground and just kind of ordinary launches on artblocks.
Yeah, that makes. What would you say? In terms of like for people who aren't familiar with the ecosystem, what are the top projects right now? That just kind of recently launched. I heard about Jurassic Fi a while ago,
Yeah,
which was pretty big.
yeah.
How's the ecosystem
Avicii is great.
right
There are well, Jurassic Fi is great, right? So just kind of to give you a couple of points regarding Jurassic Fi, I think they did a great job with marketing. Like everyone was literally talking about them, and tokenizing dinosaur fossil is just a great way to enter the market. But it's not only the dinosaurs that they plan to do, right? So there is a lot of they have like a lot of other assets in the pipeline to become maybe the biggest place for memorabilia tokenization, right? So that's a big vision. And what I really loved about Jurassic Fi is that they didn't really ask for a lot of money, and the monthly spend was like really low. So I think the team did a great job with overall like structuring the deal for the token holders. So that's why they got like so much attention.
When,
Yeah.
oh,
Go
oh,
ahead.
go ahead. Uh, I was just going to ask you, like, in terms of the companies that you're interested in, right? Because when I think of companies that would do well in this model, I was having this conversation the other day. Companies that do well in this model are companies that are kind of blocked out of traditional venture capital. That might be looking for alternative ways to fundraise. That could be some crazy companies. I mean, you could get like Jurassic Five is a good example, right? It's maybe not the best. Maybe it wouldn't be able to raise venture backed, through traditional venture systems, but it can raise very well on MetaDAO, as proven. I'm curious, like what type of companies are you interested in as a fund? Like what are you looking for?
Right. Yeah. So first of all, I would like to answer your point uh, about kind of adverse selection, right? Where if a project can get a venture funding, they might not really come to MetaDAO. And I don't, like a lot of people say that, but I have like totally different opinion about that. Because mainly, I think the founder is a major thing when it comes to early stage investing. Like for example, if I build a relationship with you, and if you know that I could bring you the value, then most probably you will prefer to do a raise together with me because I've been part of your journey, right? And like I think if you really think about it, like we humans, we love going on journeys together, and that's like what a lot of venture capital is doing nowadays, is building relations with the founders. So as one of the major uh, pillars of our fund is building those relations with founders early, whether that's in AI or robotics or like crypto, like you name it. So for me, I do want to bring AI projects. I do want to robotics projects to that out. And yes, like maybe we can say that, oh, those guys not going to be interested in having a token, right? But I'm pretty sure that it's structurable in a way where if you have like a good relation with the founder, if you bring value, if the community does bring value, then we could actually see those types of projects being launched on MetaDAO. Besides that, as on, I can tell you about like some of the areas I'm very excited about. One is prediction markets for sure, because I see the numbers, I track the numbers all the time, and the industry is growing, right? So I want to be part of it. So that's one, and we haven't yet seen any kind of prediction markets related project launched on MetaDAO. That's one. The second one is TCG. I've been like very actively participating in tokenized Pokemon market like since early 2025, right? And I think the industry has been growing a lot. And now, and being in US, I really see that like whenever you go to Target, like you can never find Pokemon in there, right? Because like people are literally standing there from 7 a.m. in the morning to get all the supply before like any normal person gets to Target, right? So there is like huge, I would say, demand for tokenized memorabilia on the market. And I think like getting into, and one more thing is that now we have, say, 100,000 users that know what does it mean to hold a tokenized Pokemon, right? So you hold an NFT representation of an actual Pokemon that is sitting somewhere in a warehouse, and you can get it shipped to your house anytime, right? So now you have like 100,000 users that understand how it works, and pretty much on the same foundation, you can now upsell any other tokenized asset because they already understand how it works, right? So I really want to fund startups in that area as well.
Yeah, Dave. David, you touched on something that I'm really excited. So, okay, so here's where I see it going. I see people being able to like, with this, this was kind of what I was trying to say with the VC thing. I see people being able to tokenize all sorts of things, right, and provide some sort of equity in it. So at its stage, like when this gets super advanced, if this meta takes off, I could see people like, And again, like it's debatable on the morality of this, but people could tokenize like their houses, their businesses, their side hustles. I mean, people could tokenize their YouTube channel. People could tokenize. I mean, there's a million little side hustles out there that could be tokenized that
Yeah.
I think would do very well in this type of market. So we started this platform, kind of like as a side project called Ace Index, which was kind of like tracking MetaX things, or MetaX Ace rounds. And one of the tweets that I made, I'll just show it to you really quick. One of the tweets that I made was like all the things you could tokenize. So I'll just go down here and show you. Like you could
I love it.
tokenize like your AI girlfriend experiment. You could tokenize like your urban garden and tiny spaces. Like all of this stuff are businesses with real revenue, which could be used for buybacks or it could be used for, if the company gets acquired. That's why
E-
I'm super excited about it.
Exactly, right. And the current sentiment on the market is that like the VCs are getting out of the game, and like I heard about VCs kind of pivoting into other industries. But like the technology is there, it's amazing, and I think we're just gonna see like a lot of new use cases of the technology being used. It's like everyone was expecting the NFT market to come back, right? But it did come back, it did come back with tokenized Pokemons, but just kind of in a new form. Like the technology found its way to a new use case that now has these like wide implications.
Yeah, it's so yeah, it's definitely interesting. The Pokemon card's a great example too, because I just think that like people are going to want these assets that actually have some real value attached to them. Do you see them replacing the meme coin narrative? Like people, and they've said that the meme coins are going to stick around. I think that they might, but do you see this becoming like outpacing meme coins when the market comes back, when it returns? Or do you see it already? Like, is this market neutral? Like, has MetaDAO been doing well despite the bearish Bitcoin stuff?
Well, MetaDAO has been doing great, and we've been running some simulations on top of token prices of MetaDAO, and we've been kind of comparing it with Bitcoin and S&P, and like MetaDAO ecosystem is doing great. That's the conclusion we have, and that's like we are showing to some of our friends. But getting back to your point of meme coins, I definitely see that there is a maybe market for meme coins, but I just want to highlight one thing that it kind of resembles the NFT market as well. By the end of NFT hype, you would see there's like hundreds of projects launching and just taking the money away, and and then like a lot of assets would go down. NFTs went down really badly. uh like with meme coins, we I guess witnessed the same, right? So if you've been active participant of meme coins, there is like a really low probability that you actually made any money by being part of the meme coin market. And I'm not saying that there aren't people that made money. There are like a lot of people that made money, but I believe that we're gonna see a new narrative, like maybe it's TCG, right? Maybe it's something else, but pretty much once you learned your lesson, as you did with NFTs and as you did with meme coins, there is a lesser probability of you getting back into the same game if there is a new game which is much more exciting, right? And I think what MetaDAO is doing differently is that they are actually protecting the game, right? Because before the game was not really protected. And with a protected game, we might as well see much higher interest that's not going to fade away with time.
How do you so one of the issues that I could see cropping up is founders, right? So like keeping the balance between founders feeling comfortable enough to go off on their own and kind of experiment, versus being accountable, which is a hard balance to strike up. How do you see that playing out with your fund and maybe MetaDAO as it currently is right now?
Yeah, I think that there are a couple of scenarios, right? So one is pivoting. I think that it's totally fine for a founder to pivot. Whether it should be part of the decision markets or not, I would say it should be part, because for me, decision markets kind of play of a role of the board of directors, right? And like putting on my shoes of being a board of directors in a couple of companies, I wouldn't imagine the CEO pivoting like into a like new product, or like even launching a new product on the market without actually talking with the board of directors, right? So I think that that's a really good parallel, that a CEO is really independent in day-to-day decision making, but when it comes to major decisions, you probably want your board to be part of it, right? And yes, maybe you some founders will make a decision without the board approval, but if you really want to be aligned, that's what you usually would do, right? And then you like, most often you get a lot of support. Like in my case, being an operator, like the way I started the company back in the day is that we were doing Wi-Fi advertising. Like you go to the airport, you go to the Wi-Fi, and then there is this uh, like an advertising, or you need to put your email in it, right? That's like what we've been doing at the beginning. And then the COVID hit us, and like we didn't really have any traffic in the airport, so our business was literally going down. And I was at a moment where I was actually thinking about giving all the money back to investors, and that's when we pivoted into becoming an SMS gateway, right? Like kind of a totally different industry. And we actually made it like nowadays 90% or even more of the revenue is being generated by SMS gateway. And the business is just doing great right now, right? So I think that as a founder, you should be pivoting into, if you think that that's the right way to go. But it's a good idea to actually talk with your board and get a support from them.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of founders get in over their heads. I don't think this is talked about enough. I mean, I do see MetaDAO kind of protecting people in that way, where founders don't acknowledge the fact that there's a lot of liability that goes with raising a ton of money. That seems to be an afterthought in a lot of cases. So, I mean, in this way, I think that MetaDAO might actually help in some of those situations, because that there's that kind of there's that permissionless alignment that's happening.
Yeah.
So I think that that's a good point. And in terms of like profitability, is your goal as a firm, like would your goal basically be to induce, to make sure, like, it's kind of a specific question, but maybe like, you talked a little bit about it, but what are some of the major goals that your fund would have with these founders? Would it be like making sure that the profitability is coming back into the token in the form of buybacks or whatever, or would it be like what's a good example of maybe where you would be like, okay, we need to scale this founder back, or we need to intervene a little more?
Yeah. The first flags, that uh, I usually pay attention to, and I'm not saying it's a red flag or like which color flag. It's just like something that I pay attention to is, if you are a founder and you got money, like whether you are showing the market that you deserve premium over the money that you raised. Like I'll give you an example. Uh, if you are pre-market platform in prediction markets, you have no liquidity, and let's say you raise $100 million, right? Well, most probably you wouldn't be able to show the market that the value of your company is like $200 million. So like you wouldn't be able to take the token at 2x, right? Because you took too much money, right? Like it's too early to manage so much money, right? But maybe if you would take 200K, in that case, market would think that you'll be able to manage this 200K with the premium, and your market price would basically indicate that you are capable to manage the 200K treasury with a premium on top of it, right? So that's like kind of the first very natural, like objective thinking about the price, how much the founder has raised, right? The second thing is that, and like people have different opinions about that, but I think that if you raised money and you're getting your monthly allowance, why would you also take all the revenue and also like use it without the market oversight. So if you really want to have like a very aligned structure, and like Jurassic Fi has it, for example, you would send like all of the revenue to the treasury, and then if you need to increase your monthly spend, you will just roll out a proposal and say that, okay, today we are spending 20K a month, but we would like, and because like the revenues are growing, we now would like to spend 50K, and the market will most probably agree with it because you've been doing a great job and the revenue is going up, right? So that's the second thing in terms of an alignment. And then, like the cases where we might think that a buyback is needed, and many times a buyback has been done in the MetaDAO ecosystem, most often that's because, in my personal opinion, and like my opinions do not reflect MetaDAO's opinions. I think that like in most of the cases, the founder just maybe raised too much, right? Because MetaDAO is very popular ecosystem, and if you actually made it to a curated launch on MetaDAO, it's kind of much easier to raise money. And maybe you just like overraised, and like buybacks I think are a natural thing, so that people who do want to exit your token, you give them a clear path for the exit, and you just remain the holders that are aligned with your product.
So David, I don't want to take too much time. I know we're already at 40 minutes. I don't know how much longer you have, and I don't want to, go over too much. I just have a couple more questions.
Sure.
In terms of like your portfolio, are you able to talk about, what that'll look like, without giving too much away? Like, is it going to be concentrated in a certain area? Is it going to be spread over a large number of MetaDAO projects? And the part two to this question is, are you primarily interested in the fundraising part, or are you interested in secondary as when you get involved?
Right. So like the current thinking is that our average check size is going to be 150K, right? But together with scaling the fund, and my goal is to get up to $10 million within the first 12 months. Together with scaling, I definitely see scenarios where we could go in with like 500K check. At some point, we might do like even more concentrated, where we hold, let's say, 1 million. But I don't want to go above 20% allocation to any project compared to the total assets under management of the fund, right? So I would say the cap is like 20% to 20%. The average size is going to be like 200K, but we might go like up to maybe even like up to $1 million in terms of the allocation. Not at the beginning, right? So because at the beginning we have MetaDAO with $2 million. And most probably, like in that scenario, at the beginning, we're going to be giving out only 150K checks. So getting back to your questions of how concentrated are we going to be, or like how spread, I think we're going to be investing like in a lot of projects. Without the kind of very deep concentration in any one of them.
Makes sense. Makes sense. I think I just have a couple more kind of closing questions for
Yeah,
you.
of course. Yeah.
And my first one is, what is kind of like, what, let's see. So what's the biggest mistake that maybe a crypto fund might make that you would avoid? If you want to answer, it's kind of a broad question and it's not too serious.
Yeah.
But if you kind of want to, maybe like going off some of the experience and data that we have with maybe other crypto funds, what are the biggest mistakes that that you're looking to avoid, the traps, if you will?
Yeah, I think the first is like you need to really understand who the founder is. That's the first thing. The deck might look nice and everything might look nice, but I think that understanding the founder's motivation, alignment, honesty is core, so that you avoid any future contradictions with the founder, right? I think it in a way, like again, having the experience of being an operator of the companies, it very much resembles how you would recruit, let's say, the top management of the company, right? You really want to have aligned people. You really want to have people like A players that would recruit other A players, right? So I think like investing in A-type players is very important, right? And that's something that I wouldn't want to make a mistake with. Yeah.
Have you ever has we seen like what's like in MetaDAO projects, have we already seen like founders getting, like maybe if this founder's not doing a good job, there's a proposal or some sort of, process where the founder is maybe removed and replaced with another founder? Like how, what's sort of the, have things gotten to a stage where we have some data on like what if something goes terribly wrong with a MetaDAO funded project, and what was the response or the solution to that?
Yeah, I think the case that, I mean, there is a current case with Zinc which has not yet been. I think the proposal is still live, but talking about some previous cases, I think the case with Ranger, and I'm not saying that there was anything wrong. It's like there was a case from token holders about the project, and and actually the treasury was liquidated, right? The cool thing is that like the ICO price of the token was 0.8 and the liquidation price was 0.82. So essentially, whoever was still holding a token got more than they invested in the beginning, right? So from the hedge fund perspective, from my fund's perspective, like it's a no-brainer, like your downside, and I'm not saying that that's the case about all the projects in the future, right? But the downside is being somewhat protected, right? So your drawdown is somewhat protected in every project, which gives you this, like when we're simulating it through the formulas, it just gives you this like insane performance as a hedge fund.
So I have one more question for you, David, and then and then we can close it out, because I know we're almost at an hour here. What when when ownership capital, like let's say ownership capital reaches, $100 million, as a fund, under management, what does that look like? Like, what is the kind of grand vision, the ultimate vision for ownership capital at scale?
Yeah, I think we really want to be in the frontier technologies, and like funding is the frontier teams in the industries, right? Because right now it's there are like two investment managers. And by the way, the fund is not yet launched, so we are working with Cole Freeman and Mellon to structure the fund right now. So it's going to be live at the end of August. But like getting back to your question of like scaling up, I think we would use we're going to use like a lot of AI. So we are already developing kind of internal brain system that is helping us with a lot of the due diligence and on-chain analytics, right? But I also think getting back to the relationship building, we're going to need to scale up our team to be like in pretty much researching different industries that might get big soon, right? So that's, I would say, would be the major focus together with the growth, like being there in the industries that are not yet big but have a high potential to becoming big. Yeah.
And for holders, like holders get like, if people want to hold the token is live right now, they can buy the token on secondary and
Oh,
participate in metadata in ownership capital.
oh no. So ownership capital does not have a token, right?
Okay.
So yeah, that's very important that ownership capital is a standalone fund. It's an open-ended fund, and MetaDAO is basically investing into it as an entity, right?
I see. Okay.
Yeah, so we are not planning to tokenize the fund or issue any tokens as a fund. Yeah. So we're going to be
So
working with a lot of family offices pretty much, and like a lot of different LPs, investors into the fund.
would people be able to indirectly get exposure to your fund if they held the meta token, the MetaDAO token?
Yeah, it's hard to say, right? Because I'm not sure like what the economics of it is on the other side, but definitely by growing the fund and being profitable, right? That will definitely impact MetaDAO as an entity. Yes.
David, thanks for coming on. I mean, this was super insightful. I'm actually just exploring this ecosystem right now.
Happy to
I
answer any questions, anytime, just DM me and,
Yeah,
we
yeah,
can hop another call.
yeah, definitely. I'd love to have you back on. I think this area is super interesting, and I think it's going to take off pretty soon, in my opinion.
Thank you so much, John.
Thanks.
Bye bye. Have a good day.
Have a good day.